All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here on the Harmless Dave channel, talking about relatively harmless things and doing it in real time, though, for a few real people out here just like you and just like me. So there's a whole movement now, which is really cool, a movement back from digital to analog. And I just read this article about this book called The Revenge of Analog: Real Things and Why They Matter by David Sachs. And this is what David has to say. The revenge of analog represented a resurgent and reimagined value for non digital goods, services, ideas, precisely when the transition from analog to digital was supposed to be total. Everyone was supposed to be on the cusp of inventing the next great app. But the new businesses that seemed to matter in my life were something entirely different. They were places with walls and windows and sold things that you could hold in your hands. You know, maybe it's an age thing, but I've noticed that there's a certain lack of authenticity in the world today. And so I've been running out and just collecting things like, I mean, this is such an amazing album. All right. Steely Dan's Gaucho. And of course, you got the record sleeve here, which has a wealth of great information. In the old days, we used to play the records and then just stare at the record sleeve. You could memorize lyrics that way if the lyrics were included. You could find out about all of the great musicians who played on these albums, and that's the way you enjoyed a record, right? And so that stuff is coming back. We all know as of late that vinyl is outselling CDs, and that makes sense to me. Although I collect the CDs, even though those are technically all digital, or analog to digital as far as the transfer goes. David Sachs says this too. Up until very recently, if something could be digitized, its fate was a foregone conclusion. Magazines would only exist online, which is bizarre, right? But that's now you go read magazines online. Every purchase would be made through the web. Classrooms would be virtual. Any job that could be performed by a computer was already redundant. Our world would be successfully rendered into bits and bytes, one program at a time, until we reached a state of digital utopia. The Revenge of Analog presents a different narrative, however. It shows that the process of technological innovation isn't a story of a slow march from good to better to best. It's a series of trials that helps us understand who we are and how we operate. The individuals, companies, and organizations you're going to meet are not driven in any way by rose-colored nostalgia for an idealized pre-digital past. They aren't pushing the digital world away. Rather, they're pulling the analog one closer and using its every advantage to succeed. So what David Sachs is saying here is that these two worlds should be able to coexist. It isn't that analog products are rebooming because they are a nostalgic novelty, but the very fact that they embody and limit our interactions with them. We engage with our whole body when we select a record from a shelf, place the record on a record player, and delicately drop the needle. The time and effort taken is as much a part of the music playing experience as the music produced. When faced with a digital music collection, we can be paralyzed by the volume of choices coming in through a tiny interface. See, and that's what's crazy. Yeah, it's really convenient to have your Spotify playlist and you can add a song to it. But, this, I guess, limits your attention span to just one thing and you focus on that one thing. To have all the Steely Dan music in one library is super convenient, but say I just want to focus on this one album and I want to experience this album in the way it was originally intended for us. That's why collecting albums like this is pretty cool. Actual vinyl albums. It forces you to pay attention to just that. In the millions of years of evolution that led to today, digital technology is only roughly 60 or so years old. Up to the advent of digital things, much of what we made was physical, visible, and accessible. In contrast, the digital world is an abstraction. Hidden from view, its complex workings known only to a few. Digital technologies live in the microchip, the electron, and the network. We deal only with their outputs. Our sudden mastery of these new technologies has quickly and radically reshaped the world and ourselves. But are we ready and prepared for all the implications of leaving that rough and ready analog world behind? If there is a weakness in Revenge of the Analog, it's that it probably doesn't go deep enough into all the fascinating reasons that analog things are making a comeback. There isn't enough review of the deeper cultural, economic, and psychological drivers behind this return to analog. The writer here says, I may be putting my own lens on the situation, as I initially intended to follow the wave of digitization over the last few years. I have found myself buying a lot of physical books alongside my digital book purchases. I love thumbing through the pages and marking them up with small slips of paper bookmarks. My memory of a quote or passage is enhanced because I remember the words by remembering where they are in the books, the feel of the book under my fingers, and the shape of the page. I love the analog experience, even as I struggle to find ways to store all these physical books when compared to the weightlessness of a digital book. Yeah, that is an issue. Storage space. I know exactly what he's talking about. I want to have some custom shelves built in here so I can just have a wall of vinyl and CDs and books. And I don't know, there's just something warm and important, and it's just, I don't know, it's what I've been thinking of the last few years, and accumulating stuff, and it's stuff people are throwing away. I mean, I bought this at a thrift store where the records were already 99 cents, and then it was a half off day. So I spent 50 cents on this Steely Dan record, which was, it's absolutely pristine. It's like, let me just take this out of here just because, hey, I can do that. You get the MCA logo there, which is a world famous looking, exactly. It's MCA Records. And we used to call it the Music Cemetery of America because if it wasn't one of their top three things, they wouldn't spend a lot of money promoting it. But we now reap the benefits of people just tossing these records out. And records are selling. They're selling more than CD. And books, I think a good example of a book that you should have as a physical book is the Bible. Okay? I know people bring their phones to church now, and it's convenient, especially if you're bouncing around. There used to be this art of knowing where certain books were in the Bible. Don't ask me to turn to Zechariah. That's going to be a little rough, but, eventually I'll find it, or I'll go to the table of contents at the beginning. But, yeah, people just break out their phones, and they're looking at their phones. I'm like, that's your Bible? That's almost sacrilegious that your phone is your Bible. You should have a Bible. He talked about marking the book up and, putting little notes in there, little tabs. People sometimes put something of value, they stick it in their Bible, could be a reminder of something that happened in their life, some sentimental value. You can't really do that with your phone. You can't really, I know there are ways to put bookmarks in your digital files and so forth, but it's just not the same. So anyway, this book, which I think people should really check out, um, because it talks a lot about the things that I talk about, but it does it in a more scholarly fashion. I just sort of, what's the word? I just sort of wing it. The Revenge of Analog: Real Things and Why They Matter by David Sachs. I'll put a link in the description of this video. The reason I wanted to mention this is I'm glad that analog is making a comeback. Joe Walsh, more than a decade ago, realized that he was an analog man, right? That's a great example. Even though he was hanging out with a guy who was pretty digital, making the album. I'm talking about the amazing Jeff Lynne. But hey, he made this album which basically told this story about how he prefers being an analog man. And most of the guys that I grew up with, they love vinyl. They talk to me all the time about, hey, this record or that record. And the reason we use the word record is because it's just not going to go away. And thankfully, they're selling more records than CDs these days. Although CDs are very convenient. They are. They're little records, but again, nothing compares to having the record sleeve. Just, it's better. It's better, and it's more fun. It's more interesting, and it's more educational. And as you grow older, your eyes appreciate the size of the print and the records in general. It's, you know, these little CDs, and they're not that little compared to what digital files are now as far as storage. You know, you have your little thumb drives, and then you have the cloud. You know, the cloud, the thing I'm yelling at all the time. I'm yelling at the digital cloud more than actual clouds. So in any event, it all ties together, and David Sachs has got it figured out. And I'm sure more people will realize that real things are important, and we should embrace them rather than either making fun of them or saying, hey, just get yourself a Spotify playlist, dude. It's the same thing. It's so easy. All I do is add the song to my file cabinet, and it's there. And then, yeah, you probably won't listen to that song if you're putting your playlist on random play. You probably won't hear that song for like 2 years. So just because it's happened to me. I'm like, I know I put this in my playlist, but I haven't heard it in forever because the randomizer just, it's ignoring it. The randomizer is shadow banning songs without you even knowing it. Isn't that cool? Whereas, you know what? If I want to listen to Steely Dan, it's right here. I'm going to put it on the turntable over here, and I'm going to enjoy it. And that's the way life should be.